Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to begin in the 3rd chapter of Malachi, and we're going to cover the 4th. In a previous lesson, we made it from the beginning of the 3rd chapter all the way up to the 10th verse. We're going to open by reading the 8th verse, because really the dialogue in which Malachi, the author Malachi, assumes a dialogue between the nation of Israel, signified by one voice, and Yahweh. And the main grievance in the 3rd chapter is the laxity of tithing, which he compares to a species of robbery against Yahweh. And we're going to find out more on that as we read. So beginning with, we're not going to comment on the first 3 verses. We're going to read the 8th and 9th and 10th verse and then comment on the 11th. So the 8th verse reads, "Would a man rob Elohim? Yet you are robbing me. But you said, in what have we robbed you? In the tithe and the offering. You have cursed me with a curse, for you are robbing me, this nation, all of it. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, and let there be food in my house. And please prove me in this, said Yahweh of hosts, whether I do not open for you the windows of heaven, and shall pour for you boundless blessings. And I shall rebuke the devourer of you, so that it does not destroy the fruit of your ground, nor does the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field, said Yahweh of hosts." So the positive blessing is the negation of negative forces, because Yahweh, as the sovereign controller and creator of the earth, is able to rescind the destructive forces which can consume agricultural output. Remember, the Israelites were a highly agrarian people, and this language is reflected in the Old Testament and the New Testament text. And the dichotomy between blessings and obedience are clearly alluded to in the antecedent verses. This is, inasmuch as we bless the one who is the source of all blessings, so too we may be exalted in proportion by him. But inasmuch as we curse him who is the author of all blessings, will we be denied the blessings and be in fact inflicted with curses, and rightly so. So it's not, the warning is not without reason, and everything in this book is written for a reason, and its echo reverberates today, which is why we are talking. "And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a land of delight, says Yahweh of hosts." So the function and purpose for Israel was to be a blessing to the world, and it was through them that ultimately the story of salvation has expanded to every continent at this point. Yes, every continent on the earth, and yet so much of the earth and even the church, the country remains unchurched, and yet the witness of their blessing was to give blessing to Yahweh. So they were blessed in as much as they blessed him, and cursed in as much as they cursed. That is the two-way street of the covenant, which entails duties and obligations, which, if obeyed, would result in material prosperity and spiritual blessings. "Your words have been harsh against me, said Yahweh, but you have said, what have we spoken against you? You have said, it is worthless to serve Elohim, and what did we gain when we guarded his charge, and when we walked as mourners before Yahweh of hosts?" So he's assuming the dialogue in the form of the priest, who earlier in the narrative, he issues his indictment on the target of the priest. This is his prophetic ministry, was very much oriented towards a wayward and apostate priesthood. And the priests were questioning what purpose, what gain, what reason were we being priests and doing what we do. And they were in it for the wrong reasons. Now, ministry for money, this also ties into the tithing question. There's really a lot of people have qualms about tithing to a church which employs pastors which drive to church in fancy cars, and that's a legitimate concern. but tithing is a principle that is biblical, and it's not to be thought of as a finance matter, but a matter of faith. And now we are calling the proud blessed. Not only are the doers of wickedness built up, but they also try Elohim and escape. So he's assuming the vantage point of a priest who witnessed less than faithful parishioners or people outside the church prospering, and the prosperity of the wicked is a challenge to the faithful. It challenges our faith to see those who do not follow the same standards in ethical code that we do, prospering seemingly at the expense of others, and perhaps because of their lack of moral scruples about prospering at the expense of fellow man. And then shall those who fear Yahweh speak to one another, and Yahweh listen and hear, and a book of remembrance be written before him, of those who fear his name, and those who think upon his name. So the name is of vital significance in Israelite religious and spiritual life, so much so that it was its own commandment, the third commandment, honoring the sacred name, more negatively known as by the term of sin, in which failure to heed the commandment, it may be classified as blasphemy, which broadly speaking brings the name of Yahweh into disrepute. It uses it casually or vulgarly or carelessly. But those who fear on the name and think on the name is a wellspring of thought, for it can open up doors hitherto unopened in the cognitive realm. And now when we speak, you will hear. Now a lot of people who struggle with faith struggle with seemingly one-ended dialogues, they feel, because they have no concept of a relationship with the Creator, and religion is no substitute for a relationship, and religion can conceivably compromise the relationship with the living, breathing deity. And he does listen, and the voice, the conviction is not necessarily a tangible voice, but it is clear as any tangible voice to those who have been visited by the Spirit. And and the book of remembrance is an eternal assurance. The idea being that when we arrive at the day of judgment, in the book of life, alternately referred to, that's a synonym for the book of remembrance, and a few other names are referenced throughout the scriptures, basically those who are eternally sealed for eternal blessings. And they shall be mine, said Yahweh of hosts, on the day that I prepare a treasured possession, and I shall spare them as a man spares his own son who serves him. So the claim of ownership comes now. Those who belong to Yahweh, anything we belong to belongs to us. So when we belong to Yahweh, we reside in and dwell in and abide in an abundant source of power and blessing, and we shall be spared of the judgment. That is what is to be spared for, because on our own merits and on our own righteousness, we are all equally condemned and equally wicked and inherently wayward. But the new covenant, we believers, we stand on the atonement of the Messiah, whose righteousness is vicariously imputed, not imparted, to our account at the judgment. Then you shall again see between the righteous and the wicked, between one who serves Elohim and one who does not serve him. Now, appearances can be deceiving. Many who preach and perform miracles, in Matthew 7th chapter, the 22nd through 25th verse, I believe, the Son issues a warning, frankly, that many who preach and perform miracles in his name will not be welcomed into the kingdom. They will be rejected as workers of iniquity, and depart from me, I never knew ye. Even though they said his name and claimed to follow him, they really did it with ulterior motives. And the ability to see between the righteous and the wicked is to do it perfectly is a divine. It can only be done divinely, but he does bestow upon us his infinite attributes and our finite capacities. And the discernment is a spiritual exercise to be developed. It keeps us from what is harmful and clings to us what is good. So it is absolutely essential that we develop discernment as we mature spiritually. And now the 4th chapter, the 1st verse reads, "For look, the day shall come, burning like a furnace, and all the proud and every wicked one shall be stubble. And the day that shall come shall burn them up, said Yahweh of hosts, which leaves them neither root nor branch." So the fire is all-consuming. The wicked at the day of judgment will be physically evaporated in fire. Now there's an erroneous school of thought whose origins can perhaps be traced to an apostate Catholic teaching that those who linger in hell burn eternally, and it is not impossible for the Creator to manipulate the laws of physics, such as when he revealed himself to Moses, he did so in a burning bush, which was not consumed by the fire. But it is not his. A lot of people have difficulty reconciling how a loving deity could burn sinners, as wicked and wayward as they are, for an entire eternity. And the answer is that he does not, because he is love. But their immortal soul does dwell completely estranged from any contact with any other human and deprived of the divine fellowship. So the day of judgment is going to be a great divide and a great dichotomy, and you'll be fortunate if you are spared from the judgment. "But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and you shall go out and leap for joy like calves from the stall." So joy is the natural consequence and response of salvation. And Son of Righteousness is a messianic allusion. So really from the final chapter in the Old Testament to the first chapter in the Old Testament, we do witness allusions to the Son, that being the plurality of Elohim appears 31 times in the first chapter of Genesis, and the plurality of the pronoun us is interpreted as more than one deity. And fearing the name is the condition for which we can exercise saving faith. "And you shall trample the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day that I do this, said Yahweh of hosts." So that's a militant image of which we can somewhat look forward to, in that if we do desire the destruction of our enemies, we won't have to struggle to do it. And remember the Torah of Moses, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel, laws and justice. Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai, where Moses was visited upon by Yahweh, who gave him the 10 Commandments, the Decalogue. And the formation of the law of Moses is outlined in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, collectively known as the Pentateuch, and they form the foundation for the entire Old Testament. The prophetic writings were very much within the framework of the Mosaic covenant, and the prophets were covenant enforcers of sorts, and there was often a clash and dichotomy between them and the priest, and that dichotomy is encapsulated in Malachi's account. "See, I am sending you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and awesome day of Yahweh." Now, for over 400 years, Malachi was the last voice of the prophet to speak in Israel. And according to the Talmud, the Ruach Kadesh departed after Malachi. But we Christians believe that it was visited upon by Zechariah in the temple, the father of John the Baptist. And John the Baptist was the allusion to Elijah, the prophet, who was very much somewhat of a forerunner. He wasn't the first prophet, but he was the first prophet of prominence in the divided kingdom of Israel, who set the standard for all subsequent prophets. And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with utter destruction. So the consequences for avoiding irrevocable and complete and final destruction is rooted in love of the Father and the mutual reciprocation of that sentiment from father to son, and more broadly speaking, from parents to children, because what applies to men very much applies to women, and that is one of the falling apart and deterioration of modern America is the lack of stable nuclear family, and it invites a host of evils, but they perhaps will contribute to the end times, and that day is very much captured on in the 4th chapter, and that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.